I was going to tell you that I'm recording and to be quiet. It's for a school project. Goodbye.
The bury your gaze trope.
Yes, you can see the video after I'm done, but I have to film it. I don't have
Okay.
much time. Okay, what was I saying? Hey everybody, today we are once again talking about Killing Eve, as we always are. However, today we are talking about the horrifying reality that was the Killing Eve season 4 finale. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of everything that I've been learning in women and gender studies. And we're doing this because this is also a women and gender studies project. Dr. Chen, thank you so much for listening. We're going to talk about the Killing Eve finale, and there's this article. I'll post like a picture right here or something, and then I'll edit in wherever it's
from Gay
but
Times.
there is this article called like How Killing Eve Betrayed Its Queer Audiences, and I'm not necessarily focusing on the article. I actually haven't even read the article yet, but I love the title of it, and it definitely is a betrayal. So just think of that title while we're going through this video, because it's definitely true. It was a betrayal. We're going to talk a lot about like how it could have become like literally one of the best representations for queer characters, and then it ruined all of that literally in 2 minutes. So we're going to talk about all of that, but we're going to start by like setting the basis. Why was the show good in the first place? Here we go. So to set you up, the show is literally it's formed off of the relationship between these two women, Eve and Villanelle. Eve, at the beginning, she works for MI5, which is like their security department over in England, but then she gets moved to MI6. It's a whole thing. But she is basically on like the authority department, like working for the law, you know? She gets put on a case to find Villanelle, who is the assassin. She's literally at the beginning presented as like the psychopathic assassin who happens to love women so much. But she also kills them. She kills everybody. Villanelle works for an organization called the 12. So the three things that you're really working with in this show are even Villanelle's relationships to their jobs, their relationship to each other, and then the 12's relationship to everything and how it's all connected crime-wise, you know? Like that's kind of like the underlying plot. Even though that's not why people watch. People do not watch for the 12 plot. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Another really important thing to note is that the show was originally a book series written by Luke Jennings, and it is completed, so we'll also talk about the ending of that later on. But it was adapted to the screen by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who also wrote Fleabag. Every season of the show has a new lead showrunner, and it's also important to note that season 4 showrunner Laura Neal had written previous episodes in season 3, and I also wrote pretty much like probably the best episodes of season 3. So we're gonna get to all of that, but that's just in background. So the show is based on the mutual obsession of these two women. Eve, for her job, is searching for Villanelle, but it becomes much more it consumes her so much more than like a normal job would. It becomes her literal life, and they also fall in love. Villanelle is just obsessed. She starts stalking Eve in the very beginning, and then they become mutually obsessed, and then they fall in love. So now let's get into where Killing Eve went right, because as I said, it was on its way to becoming literally the best queer representation that any of us had ever seen, especially for lesbians. So let's talk about that. Historically, queer people on television are given a few different tropes. The first one is for lesbians is like hypersexuality, and typically that's linked to villainy. That has always been the case, and the reason that's always been the case is because of the Hays Code from 1934 to 1968. That's when it was in effect. So basically the Hays Code was on effect. It was like from Hollywood for Hollywood, and it basically said that any criminal activity that was shown through characters could not be glorified or romanticized, which included queer characters at the time. This is where like queer coding came about. People would have to subtly move it in, which is why in things like The Children's Hour by Lillian Hellman,
I have loved you the way they said. There's always been something wrong.
the two women, Martha confesses her love for Karen and then dies. But that happens like throughout. So things that even if you had like a character that was supposedly gay, they had to die or be punished in some way in the end, which is where this started. So Another point of that was that it was always connected to villainy, to being the villain. Now you might be thinking, Madison, doesn't Villanelle do this? Isn't Villanelle literally a psychopathic murderer? But here's the thing. The show kind of does romanticize murder like quite a lot. And actually that's my favorite thing about it, because real life murder is obviously terrible. But when you're looking through this fictional lens, the whole show is trying to coax us into believing that Villanelle is in the right. Which is great, and it's really nuanced and interesting. And I haven't read the books, but I'm assuming they do the same thing, since they're very linked to the source material closer to the beginning, and obviously that does not stick towards the end of the series. But the point is, Villanelle is shown having the life that she wants. She constantly is striving for a very specific lifestyle, and she gets it every single time. And never, ever, ever is her sexuality something that hinders her or something that is shown needing like a punishment. The same thing with Eve. So in the show, Eve is constantly having to reassess what is too far for her. Where are her moral lines? Where is the gray? And what's too far? When she crosses the line, when is it too far? And that happens a few times over the show. But that concept of Eve accepting Villanelle's like lifestyle as an assassin, all of this darkness for working on the 12, can be interpreted as a metaphor for accepting her own queerness, whatever that means for Eve. And the show does that pretty seamlessly without punishing Eve for that, because obviously, like, there's a duality there, because while that is like the interpreted, like a metaphor you can interpret from that, there also are clear consequences for Eve for crossing that line, in which case it doesn't punish her identity, it punishes her actions for like literally killing people, you know? So that's important to distinguish as well. But through that, none of those stereotypes that we often see attributed to gay characters are given to Villanelle and Eve. There's not, even though Villanelle is literally one of the most beloved queer characters like ever to exist in modern media right now, she's not hypersexualized or fetishized in any way. She's deeply complex and real, and has like a beautiful character arc that we see in season 3, and is striving to become better for Eve. And in that, she's not losing herself, she's finding herself through leaving the literal murder behind and finding that passion in being with Eve. So even if we take that metaphor of Eve accepting Villanelle's identity or lifestyle as like accepting her queerness as well, we don't, in stepping away from the murder, we don't lose their queerness, which is amazing. So that's literally what the show worked on for 3 seasons, and it was doing real well. And then season 4 happened. So let's talk about the season 4 finale and how it just ruins everything that the show worked for. But before we talk about the episode itself, I want to talk about the 2 moments for Villanelle and Eve that were like beautiful, revolutionary moments of queer television history that Laura Neal wrote, who is the season 4 showrunner. So she is in charge of the finale in all of the show for season 4. So in season 3, Suzanne Heathcote was the showrunner. She did a great job. I really like season 3. Some people disagree, but oh well. The episodes that Laura Neal wrote were the 3rd episode, Meetings Have Biscuits, and the 8th episode, Are You Leading or Am I? So in episode 3, Meetings Have Biscuits, we get their first kiss, which was a huge moment. It was like, it wasn't overtly sexualized as lesbianism often is in television, but it was not careless. It was given so much thought, and it worked within the story. It was beautiful and one of my favorite moments literally of television history, and it was like unexpected. It was subversive in the way that it treated its characters. It was everything. Something that I also forgot to say was that in terms of how the show treats women, it also is very subversive in that way. For example, Eve is very career based, and Nico, her husband, he's supportive of her career until it goes too far for him, and then he says, I don't want this. But in that, there's never any pressure for Eve to leave her career specifically to focus on the family, even though Nico, who is also subversive in the way that men are portrayed on television, he's very nurturing. He's a school teacher. He has all of these nurturing traits that Eve very clearly does not have. So the conflict for Eve, even though it is between like, should I choose my husband or should I choose my career, it's not because I'm a woman, my duty is choosing my my husband. Instead, the show constantly pushes us towards the idea that Eve should be choosing her career, and she truly does not believe that she has to lose the other. She can have both, and it's really up to Nico to decide whether he's all in or not, and he decides that he's not. So that's another subversive way, and I just want to throw that in there because I forgot it. I also want to talk about Villanelle as a character for a second. So Villanelle as a character expresses at times extreme femininity. I wouldn't say hyper femininity, but you could interpret it that way, I guess. But it's never limiting. It's always for her benefit. It's something that she wants. So she expresses both extreme femininity and extreme masculinity at times, and all variations between that. And it's always for what she wants. It's never something that has been placed upon her. And if it is, she literally kills that person. The show doesn't limit its female characters. Instead, if anything, it does the opposite by victimizing its male characters and killing them off most times, which is always done in a thought-provoking way. It's never just killing men to kill men or killing, making women kill just to have women kill. It's thoughtful, and it's for the liberation. I believe it's for the liberation of women. Okay, so we talked about the kiss, and now we're going to talk about the finale of season 3. So in the finale of season 3, they have this beautiful dance with Eve and Villanelle where they basically talk about like domesticity, and Eve is like, we'd kill each other, like we're not gonna make it, and they basically are like, but it would be really nice. I wish we could do that. And then they decide at the end, they're on this bridge, and Eve basically is like, I am obsessed with you. I want this so badly, but I can't do it. It's not good for my health, or my well-being, my sanity. And Villanelle makes the self-sacrifice to be like, okay, I'm gonna walk away. We're gonna walk away together, and then we won't see each other, and it'll be fine. These were 2 moments that were really beautiful. Some of the show's greatest moments. Well, 3 moments because I added the dance, but these 3 moments really aided the show and left Laura Neal a great big blank space to do whatever she wanted for season 4, and it might have been too much power, everybody. Spoiler alert, because here we go. We're going to talk about the season 4 finale. I know I keep saying that, and then I keep saying, but first we're going to talk about this. But we are first going to talk about the themes in season 4, because there's an overtly religious theme in the first 2 episodes, because Villanelle, we see her at the beginning, she has become this like a hyper good, she's trying to become this beautiful Christian woman who like just lives her life for God and doesn't kill people and loves everyone and just lives like this very subdued life compared to what she was living before. And that will come back later because it's presented as something that I really, really loved, and I loved seeing that side of Villanelle. But it didn't last. We see her adopting this, and she seems to keep it on like throughout the series, even though she's not like in the church the whole time. But she still seems to keep those values throughout the season. What's really interesting about this development is that even though it was just really fun to watch, I think it really worked well, and also because Villanelle said she was doing this for Eve. It was to get Eve to show Eve she's changed. That's like one of the lines. She's like, I'm trying to show you that I've changed. So we'll come back to that. I promise we'll come back to that. So let's talk about the finale. I'm serious now. We're going to talk about the finale. So I'm going to give a quick rundown. So basically the whole show is about like figuring out who the 12 are. Once again, nobody watches for that, but it is like the plot of the show. So everybody's trying to figure out who the 12 are, and this season, somebody's killing members of the 12. We find out that it's somebody who actually works for the 12, but that person dies, and Villanelle and Eve basically say, we're going to kill them all. So their plan is killing all of the 12. Remember that. First of all, plot-wise, didn't make sense. Weak writing, but that's not what this video is about. When the season finale starts, we end up seeing Villanelle and Eve get together, who have been separated for the majority of the season once again because they both have just decided that they've hated each other for like an episode, and then they realize they missed the other one, but then that one hates them. It's a whole big thing all season, but they finally have decided we would like to be together. So we see for the majority of the episode all of that beautiful domesticity that they've been talking about since season 1, because if you remember, we didn't talk about this, but in the season 1 finale, Eve is like, literally, what do you want? And Villanelle's like, you know, a normal stuff, cool flat, someone to watch movies with, all that stuff. Oh, and in season 3 we talk about like when they're dancing, and there's that moment of like, what if we could just be like this, what if we could just have this domestic lifestyle, and they basically decide that they can't, and then we see them, we're literally given that for like 30 minutes, maybe more, I don't know, I haven't looked at the times, but we're given all of this where it seems like they're gonna live very happily together. They get on this boat, they have this beautiful declaration of love that Eve gives, which is it's very much parallel to the Fleabag hot priest speech in season 2 at the wedding. You know what I'm talking about. And then Villanelle leaves to go kill all of the members of the 12. Now, first off, I just have to mention this, writing wise, it's not done well, because the whole show has been about who the 12 are, and we see none of them. They are killed so quickly, so inconsequentially, that we don't even see it happen. So all of the 12 are dead. Villanelle comes back to get Eve. They're supposed to leave. Villanelle's like, we did it. They hug. Villanelle gets shot. I think it's with an arrow, but I could be wrong, but I'll put it on the screen. But Villanelle gets shot. She starts screaming to Eve, run. They jump off of the boat with I'm just going to say this mathematically. I'll put the tweet up if you could see this, but mathematically, somebody did the math. And it doesn't even make sense for them to jump off the boat because they would have been safer going inside. But anyways, they fall into the water. Villanelle keeps getting shot, dies literally right there. Eve lets out this blood-curdling scream. We'll get back to that. And then you see that it was Carolyn who killed him, which we didn't talk about Carolyn, but basically Carolyn from the beginning was Eve's boss, and we never were sure like who she was working with. She's kind of like kind of sneaky, you know. She would like work both sides, but then she killed, and it doesn't even make sense for her to kill her. Sorry, it doesn't make sense because they just bonded like really closely, so it doesn't like it's not even cool, you know. Anyway, the point is, Villanelle dies right then and there, and we end with that blood-curdling scream, and then it just says the end. So let's talk about that. And why it doesn't work. It's time to talk about the barrier gaze trope. Just like we talked about with the Haze Code, being queer has been linked to villainy, criminal activity, being, and in some way needing to be punished in television. So the way that manifests in Killing Eve in this finale is very, very important because there's such a big difference between like, oh, I'm killing off this character because it aids my story and this is the ending that I want and it's good and it actually works, and it doesn't, you know. It's not just to kill someone for shock value. This is just shock value, and it's one of the most beloved queer characters. So let's talk about it. Even if it had ended there, I think with the right persuasion, after like interviews and like talking to the cast and the crew, I think they could have salvaged it. People would have still been angry, but I think they could have salvaged it. But then afterwards, there were interviews. And in these interviews, Laura Neal, the showrunner, if you'll remember, said that Villanelle's death was a rebirth and a relief for Eve. That scream that Eve let out, which once again, let's just hear it. I'll just play it right here. That scream was supposed to be a scream of relief. And that Eve was now free for a more hopeful future. So in that, first of all, that completely goes against the entire concept of the show, and it undoes all of the work that every single writer had been leading up towards for the past 3 seasons. But putting that away, it inherently links Eve's queerness to sin and suffering. It turns Villanelle into an example of what happens when you follow your heart, when you follow your sexuality, follow whatever. And it shows all of the audience that's watching that both of these women must pay for their crime of loving each other and being together. And that's not even a metaphor. That's just extremely linked. And when you go back to the beginning of season 4, where Villanelle is shown as this like having these beautiful Christian values because she thinks that's what Eve wants, when you put all of that together and the rebirth in the water of her death, where it looks like she literally has angel wings because of the blood floating out of her body, that does not look good. That's literally burying her gaze. It's a thoughtless death that was done specifically for shock value, and it is harmful to queer character, or to the queer audience watching. And you might be thinking, Madison, it's just a TV show. How is it harmful? When you are represented with people who you connect to on television, and they're consistently killing themselves or being killed, if they are constantly suffering, which is the same thing that happens with women in media and in television. In one of my television history classes, we talk about that all of the time, that plays are consistently linked to women suffering. When you're shown that over and over and over again, you believe it. When queer characters are constantly being punished for their villainy, that gets into your head. It also it did not aid the story at all. And the biggest problem that I personally have is that, besides all of that, I mean, it's all a problem, but the thing that doesn't make sense most to me is that Luke Jennings wrote them in a happy relationship. Like, Luke Jennings finished the entire story with them being together, happy. Not a single one of them was dead. So what was the point? I would also like to mention that obviously Luke Jennings is not a lesbian woman, so it's interesting to see that we didn't, even though queer people were represented in the writer's room. For one, the biggest one that comes to mind is Kaylee Llewellyn, who was a big Killing Eve writer. And Killing Eve said in an interview once that sometimes, in a bigger writing room, you don't have the sole say on everything. It's a collaboration. And so sometimes, she said this, and I'm paraphrasing, basically she said that sometimes, because everybody just has to agree, you have to sit there and be like, oh, they're making the wrong decision. And for the only, at least one of the queer women on that show, who was not the lead showrunner, to think, oh, that wasn't the right decision, is so telling of how Laura Neal and the rest of the writers really cared about protecting the queer women of that show. And they weren't doing much. They were actually harming them. So, anyway, I know that was kind of rambly, but that's really what I wanted to talk about, is that this overwhelming disappointment of this show leading up to such good representation for women and for queer people, and then it's all taken away literally in 2 minutes by the oldest trope known to mankind. And once again, if you think this did not have real world consequences, it did. There were people who were fully sobbing for days. Villanelle has 2 actual, I don't know what they're called.
I was looking for the word memorials, lol.
Where people have left offerings, have left flower bouquets and cards and letters for this dead fictional characters in 2 different cities. And I'm sure it will grow. This character meant so much to so many people, and it was taken literally for nothing. And that did have a real world effect on people who had seen themselves in this character and have grown with this character for years, and then almost been promised a happy ending beforehand because of the books, and then it was taken away, literally for no reason, for shock. So anyway, that's all we're talking about today. I hope you liked it. I'm sorry that was such a downer, but I don't know what we'll talk about next time. Probably more Killing Eve. And once again, if you're still listening and your name is Dr. Chen, thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry this episode was so long. Anyway, see you all next time. Bye!